It may be 2025, but it feels like we are jumping into a time machine and rewinding pretty much a decade to Joey Barton versus Scott Brown. Welcome back to Fog Football. Happy Thursday, everybody. Big game tonight across the board. The Coefficient Cup. Can Rangers do it? Can Rangers go to Bilbao later on the night and get the job done? Who knows? But a guy that certainly didn't get the job done in Scottish football was Joey Barton. But earlier on today, yesterday, whenever it was, a Celtic fan tweeted Joey Barton, and Joey Barton fought back with some uppercuts and some jabs, like he always does. He always tends to get stuck in on social media, and we've seen it result in him going and having to pay hefty fines, whether that's Jeremy Fine or whoever. But let's actually dive in. Let's look at these tweets. Let's break it down and see what's correct and see what's not correct. So right in front of you right here, right now, is basically the sequence of tweets. So Bernie says, can't say that about Scott Brown. However, now you're probably wondering, right, well, say what about Scott Brown? So essentially what happened here is Bernie actually replied to Joey Barton, who turned around and said about Scott Parker. Parker was my bitch, got moved out of Newcastle for me, sold to West Ham because I didn't want to go. He went where I decided not to go. Second fiddle, do your research, soft lad. And every time I played against him, he got dry humped all off the park. He couldn't get anywhere near me. Absolute finger blaster. Or absolute finger blast it, sorry. Which then prompted this tweet then from Bernie to Joey Barton. Can't say that about Scott Brown. So Scott Brown, you know, he's getting in here, he's getting over Big Barton. But then Joey Barton responded and said, Scoot Brown never came to England. The big league. Stayed in the footballing backwater. The retirement home all his career. He gets zero respect. At least Barry Ferguson came and gave it a go and then put in the Union Jack. So let's just debunk this, right? Obviously, unless you've been living under a rock or you might be of a certain age, I don't know. Joey Barton had 8-9 games for Rangers. He played in an Old Firm, but he played in one and his arse folded. There's that image that I do think is iconic of them not warming up, but they're coming out, the lineups, and Scott Brown is looking at Joey Barton and Joey Barton can't make eye contact. See Joey Barton, right? I think he is the biggest want-to-be tough man, almost borderline in the history of football, right? And he is coming across as just an absolute jabroni here, in my opinion, right? Now, is he on to something about the fact that Scott Brown never challenged himself outside of Scotland? You could argue that, right? And people argue the same goes for Cal McGregor. But I think it would be hypocritical for me to bury Scott Brown and Cal McGregor like that, right? Because whether it's a choice or whether it's the fact that no one's interested, is it irrelevant? But let's discuss it. If I was good enough to be a professional footballer, right, and I played for Rangers, I wouldn't want to leave. I would want to play my entire career at Rangers till I was deemed not good enough and I had no other option. Now, is that the case with Scott Brown and Cal McGregor? We've heard rumours of bids that have never really went anywhere. Now, with Scott Brown, he, in fact, started at Hibs, you know what I mean, then went to Celtic, right? But they've never went to the quote-unquote big league for Joey Barton, right? I think it's disrespectful to Scott Brown and Cal McGregor, right? Do I think that Cal McGregor and Scott Brown are a tad overrated? Yes, I do. Is that my blue tinted spec speaking? Who really knows? I like the fact that Big Joey Barton here is putting over Barry Ferguson compared to Scott Brown. And in my opinion, well, not in my opinion, a lot of other people's opinion, Barry Ferguson is better than Scott Brown. Absolutely. 110% for me. Obviously, Scott Brown has got a lot more trophies, but I would argue that Scott Brown had it easier. And that's not Scott Brown's fault. That's not his club's fault, right? At the end of the day. But you've got to beat what's in front of you, and they did. But I'm absolutely going to say that Barry Ferguson is better than Scott Brown, and it's not even due to the fact, right, that Joey Barton goes on to and speaks about here. It's not down to the fact that Barry Ferguson, played down in England, whether it be with Blackburn or Birmingham, even though he did reasonably well. I mean, he did lift a trophy with Birmingham City. That's one of the last things that they've ever enjoyed in their history recently. I mean, yeah, yeah, it could change for him. I don't know why they've hired a bunch of jabronis from us. Like, I mean, the absolute bottom of the barrel, the dross, the shite, the mundane, the run of the mill. You get where I'm going with this. But for me, it's like Joey Barton. I would almost have a bit more respect for him, right? If he gave it a proper go in Scottish football, right? And that Rangers team, realistically, was never going to beat Celtic to a league title, right? But he came up here and dropped the fucking ball big time, and he's given it the biggin, right? Now, here, maybe if Joey Barton joined Scottish football 10 years prior to his actual move, right, when he was like in his mid 20s rather than his mid 30s, maybe things could have been different because I don't think Joey Barton's the worst player ever. I think he's pretty decent, right? Is he better than Scott Parker? Is he better than Mark Noble? I think he's in that ballpark, to be honest. I don't think there's a massive gap between them all, personally. But yeah, it is a bit disrespectful to the game up here and also other players that have never left Scotland. I mean, there's a lot of players where their best spells have came up here. You know what I mean? And it's like, if I, personally, if I was Joey Barton, right, and I came to Rangers and I played 8 games and was shite and then called it quits after getting battered in an old firm in which I refused to look at Scott Brown because it came across that I was a shite bag, I wouldn't open my mouth about Scott Brown and vice versa. But of course, Joey Barton kind of opens his mouth about everything. Here, there's some things Joey Barton is bang on about, and then there's some things that he's absolutely wide of the mark about. But here, that kind of can be everyone. A broken clock can be right twice a day, or in some cases, it can be right all but twice a day with a clock. You know what I mean, big man? Reality is, here, Scott Brown has never went to England, and Joey Barton's bashing that. But when all is said and done, who's going to be looked back on as a better footballer across the board? It's going to be Scott Brown. It is. It's always going to be Scott Brown. Like, and that's not me just completely bashing Joey Barton, right? But see, like Scott Parker, Mark Noble, Joey Barton, and maybe this is the the Glasgow Goldfish Bowl, but it's like they're free nobodies in the large scheme of things. Like they've fucking won practically hee haw combined. If we're being brutally like honest about it, and yeah, Peter will go, Scotland's a tin pot league. Scott Brown is going to be remembered as one of Celtic's like greatest ever captains. What are the other 3 going to be remembered as? Nobody's really. Like, if we're being honest, like Joey Barton is done more in like the past couple of years on social media to stay relevant and keep relevant than he ever did as a footballer. That's just my opinion. But here, I like him sticking up for Barry because for me, Barry Ferguson is clear of Scott Brown and co. But until next time, guys, leave your thoughts down below and peace.